All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Can I get a motion to approve and accept this agenda with an amendment to item 7D, personnel report as recommended? Motion. Second. All those in favor? Aye. All right, so we are going to head into our work session. I first want to thank our legislators who are in attendance today. I think it's my understanding our last one's on the way as well, so I think we'll have all 5 representatives from our district here, and we really appreciate you taking time out of your busy legislative session to come and learn alongside of us. So while I've got a minute, I hope Melissa's not listening. While I've got the legislators here, I thought I might just outline our 4 legislative priorities that we'll be advocating for. So you'll be hearing from us around the importance of early literacy, which I know is one of the governor's priorities, quality preschool, including resources for full-day programming and support services, adequate and timely state supplemental aid, and teacher recruitment and licensure. So more to come. That's not why we're here tonight, but I thought I'd share those 4 priorities while we've got you in the room with us. So really the purpose of our work session today is to understand how the district utilizes AEA services currently. Obviously this is our meeting. It's an opportunity for us to learn, but we really want to learn alongside the 5 of you as well. So we want you to feel comfortable to ask questions for clarification as needed. So we would just ask, we are live streaming our work session. So if you guys have questions as the district is presenting, we are going to ask that you step to the microphone to share those so people can hear those as well. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Pruitt.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you to our legislators for being here and everyone in the audience that are in attendance for today. The work session is going to focus on the services that the Heartland AEA provides in general, but then my team will then go into how we utilize those services here in specific to Ankeny Community School District. And so, again, the purpose is to understand Heartland AEA and the services they provide and then how they support this presentation. And so I'm really happy to have our partner in this educational work here in Ankeny, Dr. Cindy Yellick. She's the Chief Administrator for Heartland AEA, and she'll provide the overview of AEA services and a little bit of history around the AEAs also.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Pruitt. Oh, quicker, thank you. All right, thank you so much for your time and allowing us to talk about services at Heartland. Thank you for our legislators. I know you've had a lot of outreach, and we appreciate the response that you've been giving and following up with people and really digging. Sincerely appreciate that. That we offer. So I was 9 AEAs, actually began as 15 AEAs in the mid-1970s. And at that time, they were established to provide efficient and equitable services to students across our state. As I said, we started with 15. There was 1 AEA within each community college boundary. Over the years, those AEAs have consolidated and merged so that we now have 9. Heartland AEA is housed in Johnston, although we do have a satellite office in Ankeny, and we serve the 54 districts in central Iowa. So it's important for you to know that we serve all public schools and all accredited non-public schools. So special education services are delivered both in accredited and public schools, as well as media and technology services. So we're going to talk about the 3 broad areas that AEAs work in. We were funded from the inception around 3 service areas: special education, media technology, and education services. I think it's really important to understand that while we were funded since our inception in those 3 areas, they are not equal funding streams. Special education at Heartland is about 80% of our budget. Statewide, it's about 73%. Media, technology, and then educational services divide up pretty equally the other two funding areas. And the way it works is that in special education, there is a formula that is run based on certified public school enrollment, and that is what funds special education. For media, technology, and education services, the funding formula involves your certified enrollment and then enrollment in accredited non-public schools. And the reason there's a difference from special education and the other two areas is because at its inception, when federal law passed in the mid-70s for IDEA, or special education law, it was the thinking at that time that students requiring special education would be funded in public schools. And that is why there's a separate, two different formulas for special education and then media, technology, and educational services. In special education, the district then is responsible for providing what we would generally think of as the instructional portion of a student's day. So they provide the teachers, you all provide transportation, if there's a specialized nurse, if there's a paraprofessional, those all come from the special education dollars that you currently have. What then the AEA provides is what we call support and related services. So if a student requires a speech-language pathologist, occupational therapist, teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing, and orientation and mobility specialist, those all come through the AEA. I think it's also important to understand that currently the AEA is responsible for serving children from birth to age 3. It's what we call early access. So if a baby is born and spends time in the NICU, their family can actually be paired up with a Heartland staff member before they leave the hospital, and they can help them do case coordination and services from the time they leave the hospital. And for some students, we stay with that student all the way through age 21. So we say we serve from birth to age 21 for eligible individuals. In the area of media and technology, when we were formed in the 70s, we were asked to put media centers in with professional libraries and also literature for children. If you think about that, some of you are as old as I am, and you remember getting to be the one to flip the film strip structure. Yeah, we don't have films anymore, but we do have a lot of electronic and online resources, so databases, electronic books, search engines that we are able to buy down at the state level and then give access to for your teachers and your students. Media technology also includes a van delivery system, and it's important to understand that while that is actually delivering books, so one of your second grade teachers might say, we're studying weather this month and we want to increase our classroom library, they can call Heartland, a box of books is curated on weather, is sent to the teacher that they can use in their classroom, then they send it back to us at the end of the month. At the secondary level, you might think of that as a teacher wants everybody in the class to read the same novel, and so they check out a novel set from us. But what's important to understand is while those media materials are
delivered on a van, that van system is also used to deploy OT and PT equipment to schools and to families. The AEA is able to work with vendors to get a variety of equipment so a family can try it out with one of our physical therapists to see what the appropriate equipment is, and then they can use that to make a decision on what to purchase or buy. Our third area then is education services. In this area, we're providing things like literacy consultants, math consultants. This is also the area that does professional development. And something that is highly utilized by most schools is our our para certification program. So if you have a paraprofessional who becomes certified, they can go into the program that then helps them become a licensed teacher that's offered through the state. This is really important when we think about teacher shortage. So we have that paraprofessional certification. We also offer substitute teacher authorization classes, which has also been in high demand since the pandemic. Also in education service area, I think it's important to understand this is where mental health supports come. So mental health supports can include professional development for teachers to think about how do you work with students who maybe who need additional mental supports in the classroom, but it's also our crisis team. So if your district were to experience a tragedy such as death of a student or death of a teacher, and they feel like they need some on-site counseling support for students and teachers that next day, the team can be there. I think a lot of you know that our team was in Perry within about an hour of their tragedy and has been in some capacity there this whole time. And that's something that is funded through education services. So it's important to know that that's one of the services there. Also in education services, if you have a building that's identified as needing ESSA support, that comes in conjunction with the Department of Ed through that educational services frame. So that's a broad, super fast overview of all our services, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Start up here with directors. What questions do you have for Daniela? I had a general question about the books and the deploying of that. Is there a form that they, like, do teachers all know about that, right? And how much utilization is coming from that? And if there is a book, is that something that becomes on a wait list? Is there a planning around it? Just trying to understand that piece of that.
There's an online ordering system for the books, so they can log on and do that. They each have their own login information. Last week, we shared some information with Dr. Pruitt about the number of books that your district accessed, both print and I think online. Thank you, yes. It's also important to note with the electronic books, if there are certain books that your district has determined you don't want students to have access to, access to those can be turned off down to the teacher level.
I just want to ask one clarifying question, because you hear a lot. So your initial purpose from the get-go was in all three of these areas, correct?
Right.
You've not moved away from your initial purpose as an organization. Okay.
So from the mid-70s, if you look at the original code, and even if you look at the proposed House study bill, you see where the language is stricken out. We've always been funded in those three areas.
Okay. And then my next question is, there's no timeline to sign up for services, or if we get a surprise student who needs a service that we've never utilized before, they're just always there and ready and available, correct?
I wasn't sure if you were asking about the current system or what's being proposed.
The current system.
The current system, if you have a student who moves in who has a need that isn't already being supported in the district, then that we flow that service to you.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else?
Not yet.
I have an additional question if I can. Talk to me about talented and gifted and TAG services with that. So you hear special ed. Where does talented and gifted fit into these buckets, and where do you see that being utilized best?
Right. So both education services, education services include talented and gifted services. We have talented and gifted consultants that can work with your district on program design or differentiation of curriculum. Within that group also is ELL services. So if you have English language learners in your district, and I'm sorry, what was I got a little distracted. Someone's phone is buzzing up here. So
no, you're okay. No, just asking about that. Which
okay.
category does that fall under for
okay.
services being utilized? Thank you.
Thanks.
So I think, Sarah, when we had the tag presentation, that whole process of the audit they went through, that was facilitated and identified the priorities that was all facilitated through.
So it was initiated by Ms. Beck, our talent to get the specialist, and through consultation with AEA.
I have another question. Is there, what do wait lists look like? Like time between when we need a service and when someone's able to get here for, whether it be a mental health issue or auditory issue, or what typically is that time between when we requested something and when something can get to the district?
Well, it depends a little bit on the service. The majority of service there would be no wait time. I don't mean like you call in the morning and your students moved in and it's that afternoon, but it would be, very soon after that. Some things like support around some behavior analysis, that's a pretty specialized team, that might take a little longer, a couple weeks maybe, but most of the services are available within, a very short time.
24, 48 hours.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I'm going to tag onto that question and say, how do you see that changing as the bill passes? Do you think that wait time will, especially for because a lot of what the bill's saying is special needs, do you see that wait time being longer, or the availability for us to serve those students longer?
The language in the current bill proposes that a district would have 3 options. 1 would be to contract with the AEA, 2 would be to set up your own division of services, and 3rd would be to contract with independent corporations or private providers. I really can't speak to the timeline on private providers. We do sometimes have to employ an outside vendor if we have, for an example, a lot of SLPs that are out at the same time, and we have to contract with one for service. And we do know that the cost is about double what it is to have somebody on staff, but I don't think that's a long-term solution most districts would look at. As far as wait time for other services, I think it would really depend on what the mix is that you decided to set up as a district. There are some things that are what we call low incidence. So a student that needs orientation mobility support. So a student that's visually impaired and they need assistance learning how to use their white cane. That is something you may or may not, as a district, have somebody on staff that could go right away. And we don't know. For us, it's going to be really determined on how many districts decide they're going to run their own services versus how many will stay with the AEA. So it's a little bit hard to predict how that's going to impact that timeline.
An SLP is speech language pathologist.
I'm sorry, thank you so much, Kitty. Yes, an SLP is a speech language pathologist. Thank you. You can tell I've been having this discussion too many times, and I slipped in.
I have another question, if I can. With these services, are they all the people that are providing the services to students, particularly once they're in the PK through 12? Are they providers coming into the buildings? Is there ever a case where they have to go out to one of your facilities, or is it largely coming into the buildings and servicing the students right there?
So our services are, by and large, in your buildings, in your districts. That is one thing, even with early access, that birth to 3, our providers are in people's homes, they're in preschools, community preschools and daycares working with the student. The one service that I can think of that they come to the Johnston office is if they need hearing screening. So the hearing booth, there's a hearing booth in Johnston, and so that is something they would have to travel to one of the offices for.
Well, and for speech, my little guy was within the district for preschool, but we opted to do transitional kindergarten. So to receive his speech services, he went to the site in Ankeny to receive his services.
So there are situations depending upon where the student attends. Also, if they're an accredited non-public school, we can push services in there, but there are all kinds of configurations where families live and work and where the student attends and what program they've decided that gets figured out, I guess that's what I would say.
I don't know, that's a question.
Do you want me to come to the microphone to ask it? Okay. It's for you, though. So thinking about just even though it's technically 3 different buckets with different funding streams, can you talk a little bit about, even though they are technically separate things, how they might overlap and how each one of them are integral to whole child support?
So I think we like to say special education students are general education students first. So if you think about a student's day, they're not compartmentalized on this part of my day I'm special ed, this part of the day I'm gen ed, right? So our services really try to support the student across their learning environment. I think it's also important to understand that Because the AEA system was built across these 3 funding streams since its inception, the services really are integrated. So media technology and special education, we have something called an assistive technology specialist who can come out and help a student maybe figure out how to use an iPad to communicate better or to access curriculum in a different way. And I talked about the issue of the van delivery is different. Education services, we know that for a student to be the most successful, they have to have quality instruction in the gen ed classroom and the special education classroom. So you're looking how to support teachers to do that across a student's whole day. So that's important to understand, but I also think it's important for you to understand that special education dollars cannot be used to support media technology or ed services, but it can go the other way. So we can use media technology to support special ed or education services to support special education, and that is the case at Heartland. So we do use monies to support in special ed. If you just think about my opening comment about it's about 73% of our funding that is for special education, but about 80% of Heartland's budget goes to meeting the needs of special education students. So we've used some of those funds to support special ed.
Sorry, keep coming up with questions. What I'm gonna say layers of bureaucracy. Someone requests someone from your office to come in. Do they have to talk to several people to get that? Do they get to go right to that person? What does that look like?
Okay, so every district in Heartland has a regional administrator. Ankeny happens to be here tonight. And if there's any supports they need, they can call that regional administrator. That regional administrator works with staff that are assigned specifically to Ankeny and can deploy that service right away or as soon as possible. So it isn't a situation where they ask Dr. Pruitt calls me, and I call down the chain. It's They talk right to their regional administrator.
And nobody's waiting for any approval, or it's just we requested it?
The only time I can think that there's, and I wouldn't say it's approval, sometimes a district will ask for something that's like, we want to bring in this national speaker, right? And we have to figure out layers on our end about, do we have, the dates and the space and all that. So it's not what I would say is approval, but sometimes we're a big organization and we have to problem solve and get other departments like the registrar involved or something like that. But it isn't so much about us saying we will or won't provide a service.
So you just touched on something else. You help districts secure speakers or specialists outside of the AEA to come in, maybe nationally renowned. Is that something you offer as well?
We have done that in the past, yeah. We've had some small districts that have come together and said, this speaker says they have to have 200 people. Well, we don't have 200 people. And so we'll work with a consortium of districts so they have the right number, and then we can help contract with that. We can help set up the registration system and help them procure that person.
Okay, thank you.
I would just add to that, I don't know where my day hat here. Like, I think 8 times out of 10 times, you don't even have to go through an RD to get somebody from AE to help you. I'm guessing a number of times special ed teacher wants some consultation, they're just gonna go right to their AEA support, or, Al may have somebody in to work with the instructional coaches or something. I don't want to speak specifically about what it looks like in this district, but I don't want to send the message that you must go through the RD in order to the regional director to get any sort of services through the AEA.
I think it's an important point to understand. There are Heartland AEA staff in Ankeny schools every day of the week. And if a building principal or a teacher says they have a need, they ask that person that's in their building. They don't say, oh, well, you're here, but I'm going to call somebody else just to help me with this, right? It's much more of a collegial relationship.
Okay.
Other questions? Any of you guys have questions before we shift to the district? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you, Dr. Yellick. So we'll have members from the academic services team come up and talk a little bit about what this looks like in Ankeny. So we have Al Meppel, who's the Director of Professional Learning, Leadership Development. We have Tara Owen, the Executive Director of Elementary, and Nancy Lehman, who is our Director of Student Services. And so we will start with Ms. Owen, and she's going to talk about educational services in Ankeny.
Hi,
I feel fairly lucky that much of what we just discussed will be echoed.
I think it's on. Does it feel like it's on? The light's not on. I don't think there's power to it. Let's see it right here. Good. I'm going to see the light right here.
All right, there we go. Oh, there we go. All right. So we'll just start off with some of the educational services that we discussed, but specific to Ankeny. So when thinking about the curriculum content consultants, we often think of literacy, math, science, social studies, CTE, computer science, and digital learning. Just an example would be thinking through the math consultant. Last summer, we revamped a bit of our summer term programming, and we worked closely with the AEA math consultant to help us look at how can we best deliver that programming. And she supported in looking at instructional practices, researching summer programming to be able to support with that. And then along with our curriculum review, both in the area of literacy and math curriculum review, we've partnered with our literacy and math specialists to support that work and to make sure that the implementation is rolled out in a way that supports our teachers. Student services consultants, when we think of those, the consultants that were mentioned earlier, the ESL and TAG consultants, both partnered with our district specialist when looking at the program review. And so we mentioned just our ELP program review and how the partnership between Mrs. Beck and AEA was vital in looking at that audit.
Tara, TAG and ELP are synonymous.
Thank you.
Gifted and talented.
Yes.
And ESL.
Yes, with gifted and talented and English as a second language.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. And then also, here's another one, SEBMH, our social, emotional, behavior, and mental health. We have consultants that have partnered with Sean Bierman, and currently we are having social emotional learning, professional development at all of our district buildings. And through the partnership with our SEL specialist, Sean, as I mentioned, providing that learning as they have collaborated with AEA and the content of that. And then the nurse consultant. When thinking about the nurse consultant, so far this year, 2 times have come out and worked with our nurse team when looking at things such as health plans and supporting students' IEP or individual educational plan and the health plan that could go along with that or separate from that. And then lastly, the professional learning and leadership development. So thinking through that lens, we have assessment that we spoke about, instructional coaching. Thinking of our instructional coaches, cognitive coaching is a course that many of our coaches and principals have taken that has been through partnership with AEA. Looking at the MTSS process, the multi-tiered system of supports through the academic, literacy and math lens, but also that behavior lens. And thinking through how do those tiered systems of supports look in our buildings. So in partnership, oftentimes with building level teams, our AEA consultants will be able to support in, do we have processes that are setting all of our students up for success? And then lastly, professional learning and leadership. And that I can give specifically, we spoke about our principals and our instructional coaches meet monthly through support with Al Neppel and then the Heartland AEA instructional coach are providing leadership development as that's connected to facilitating small groups of teams, supporting groups to be able to collaborate in their professional learning communities together. So that's a monthly leadership development opportunity that's a partnership with our district along with AEA.
Hello. I'm Nancy Lehman, serve as the Director of Student Services for Ankeny, and want to talk just a little bit more specifically about special ed services that we partner with Heartland on. But before I jump into that, I want to echo something that Cindy said first, and that true rich special education services start with a strong core, and all students with an IEP are general education students first. So without that strong core support, we would never have strong special education support. So just knowing how important that partnership is the whole child's experience. Please keep that in the back of your mind as I jump into some of these special education ones. I would describe our relationship with Heartland when it comes to special education as a true partnership. One side is not able to function without the other at this point. We serve in both supporting students and schools in making sure that our teachers are supported, our administrators are supported, and our students are supported through a variety of, I feel like I'm going to repeat some things that were said, but through a variety of services. So those direct services to students often happen with our occupational therapy, our speech language pathology, our physical therapists, our audiologists. They're all back there, so hi. So just making sure that they can provide those direct specialized services that we simply don't have on our staff and that are unique to individual students' needs. And then we have these school-based consultants, psychologists, social workers, and school psychs that really, really help us to refine and define what a student's plan needs to be. They help us write IEPs, they help us observe students, they help us problem solve, they help us really design instruction in a way that moves students forwards. So that true partnership and that specialty that they bring is absolutely critical. We also partner with Heartland on the challenging behavior and autism team. For some of our more intense or more difficult plans, we need that really specialized team around a student so that they can be successful and access education. That team, I wish you could all come watch that team. That team is magical in their ability to understand the function of behavior, to use data analysis to make decisions for students, and to really support students and families so it can be a very traumatic time and help education be a positive experience versus a challenge. So that team is really, really important. And then we also have some specialty teachers within AEA that really provide a unique service that we simply don't have. And that's our teacher of the blind, and I'll say it wrong, blind and visually impaired and deaf and hard of hearing. Those are not as common as you might think, but really understanding how to work with that disability so that the students can access their education. It's just mind-blowing. I had the opportunity to go to the Iowa Department of the Deaf the other day, and it was just so interesting to hear all the things that we could be doing to help students that are hard of hearing being able to access their education. And that specialty doesn't come, you can't get that at Walmart, let's just say that. So the other piece that I really want to emphasize that Cindy said is the early access team. If you remember, they serve students birth through 3. Their ability to provide that direct service to students at that young age, and then the students come to preschool, is just absolutely critical. Think about that student not having those services birth to 3 and then showing up at preschool, right? That would be, we'd love them, we'd take care of them. But that early access is really critical, not only for the students, but for the families who are learning how to work forward and work with that disability and making that child experience the most success that they can. This slide is kind of a summary, just a breakdown of the staff from Heartland that currently support us at Ankeny. It's not really broken down in how they're structured within Ankeny, but within Ankeny we have an early childhood team that consists of social workers, consultants, and speech language pathologists. We have 2 elementary teams, one that serves north and one that serves south, that are made up of behavior, social, emotional, and academic focuses, a significant disabilities consultant, and speech language pathologist. And then we also have a secondary team with that same chemistry. So the team size is based on the need within the building and the cluster of schools, but they all have that similar chemistry of components. And lastly, this has also been touched on a little bit, but the amount of support with behavior and mental health that Heartland helps us to deliver and provide, not only to students, but also in developing our teachers, is significant. They are really working and partnering with us on what it looks like. We've referred to MTSS a ton of times before, that multi-tiered system of supports, and knowing that that triangle is really a pyramid. There's a back side, the boys have the reading side and the math side, and then that social emotional behavior side of that. And Heartland's been really foundational in helping us to develop those tiered system of supports, which complements really nicely with our positive behavior interventions and supports. So those two things are very nicely related. And then in training that Heartland provides, it has really been helpful, especially for our social workers and school counselors and some administrators, has been the youth mental health first aid trainers. And what that helps us to do is be able to look for the risk factors and warnings that may indicate the need for some mental health support or behavioral support within our students, and emphasizes the importance of early intervention and supporting our students in crisis. So that training and that constant support has been very helpful for several of our teams. Questions before I share?
I do have a question.
Yes.
When you spoke about the services 0 to 3, can you just speak to Heartland's role in, because we have early childhood special education as our preschool model, what role does Heartland play in that? I would call it a transition, but because it really is a transition of services from what they're receiving in their home to what they come to us in preschool. Can you just describe the role that Heartland plays there?
Yep. Typically, in early access, they have, I need the acronym, an EAP, right? No. IFSB. Thank you, Jane. An IFSB. So it's a plan for a student 0 to 3. If that student's going to remain eligible for special education services, Heartland helps us to take the data from that plan and transfer it into an eligibility conversation with an IEP. So they sit collaboratively with our preschool teachers and draft that IEP for the student and talk about what they've received thus far, what's successful, how that would transition into a school setting, and the priorities for their learning within that time frame. So it is a warm handoff, and then honestly a continued partnership, because they're in the building providing a lot of SLP services. Sorry, speech language pathologist services. You guys have that one yet? But they're just there all the time, ingrained in that environment, and really partnering to get the kids moving forward. Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions for Nancy?
I have a question about when a student is assigned an IEP, is there a cycle of how long they may or may not stay on? Are you seeing, what's that cycle that we try to get them graduated off it or graduate off services, or what kind of cycle are you seeing with that, and how does the AEA play into evaluating the IEP? Do we need to make modifications? How does that look? And how does that impact funding the services with people coming in?
That's like a 4-point question. Good job.
I have a lot of questions about that.
It's okay. An IEP is reviewed annually and then reevaluated every 3 years. So every year, the IEP team that consists of the parents, the student, the special education teacher, and a general education teacher, and likely an administrator within Ankeny meet to review the data and the progress monitoring within the IEP to see how is the student doing towards their goal. If they're reaching their goal, but their goal needs to be more rigorous and needs to go forward, then they re-examine the goal, rewrite the goal, and then measure again. Sometimes you've got kids that are on there for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and sometimes you've got kids based on the disability that are on there longer. So there's no generic or preferred time frame. That's based upon the student need. Heartland plays.
I'd like to chime in. I think also we have to understand that the goal of the IEP is to assist the child in gaining proficiency.
Yep.
And so inevitably our goal is to assist the child based off their disability to transition off the IEP as they attain the goals within their IEP. And so every child is different, and so their ability to transition off an IEP is dependent upon the services that they're getting in our school district, and potentially services outside of their school of our school district through their family. But again, our goal is to, one, and I think I've heard this, decrease the achievement gap that we're seeing in our state, specifically in Ankeny, with regards to how our kids with IEPs are performing academically. And so my goal in Ankeny is to continue with that expectation that we, once a child is identified of needing special education services to assist them at the district level, and then also in our schools, and then our partnership with AEA with allowing them to transition off based off of their disability and their ability to show proficiency over time. There's no set timetable for when that may happen, but the expectation isn't that if a child is identified as a 3-year-old that needs special education services in math, that they're going to continue to have that IEP until they graduate. If we're doing our job right and depending upon their disability, we should be able to transition them off once they've shown proficiency and are attaining their goals in their IEP.
You can also, as a parent and as the team, amend the IEP sooner than a year. So you don't have to wait for that year. It can be amended at any point.
Correct. So what part of your question?
Do you feel like that answered your question? That's a big question.
But it's also 504s that are in there as well. IEPs and 504s, correct?
Yeah, well, Heartland helps support 504s, not necessarily in the same way that they do an IEP, but we do have a 504 contact at Heartland that we collaborate with, yes. And they provide great training for 504s. Section 504, another acronym, sorry.
Any other questions for Nancy?
Perfect.
May I ask a question, sorry?
Yes, please, if you wouldn't mind stepping to the microphone. Thank you.
So, Mike Bigelow, thank you guys so much for having this. I think it's been very educational. Thanks everyone for being here. I don't serve on any education committee, so a lot of this is an education for me. But look, I'm a numbers person, so I like numbers. Looks like the last numbers I had, we had 12,671 full enrollment here in Ankeny. And of that 12,671, 1,518 have the IEP, which I think is Individualized Education Plan. Am I keeping up with my acronyms? It's give and take. There's been a lot at me tonight here. SLP, I've got that down. That's roughly 12%. So my question is that per capita, 12% for our school district? Similar, how does that compare to other school districts, you know, regardless of size? And secondly, how has that percentage changed over time? So say over the past 5 years, over the past 10 years, over the past 20 years, like, is that a bigger percentage than it was 10 years ago, a smaller percentage, same percentage? It's always been. So those are my two questions. Thanks so much, and thanks again for being here and the information.
Dr. Yelly, do you have any information with regards to special education, at least within the Heartland AEA, with similar districts, thinking of Waukee, West Des Moines?
About percentage?
Yes. And Senator Buswell, I think that because we've been fortunate enough in Ankeny to have a lot of growth, our percentage has been consistent with our growth. And so when we were 10%, it wasn't 1,500 kids, it was probably 1,000 students. When we were 5,000 students in Ankeny, we were probably 500 students receiving IEP services.
So it's been about 12%.
10 to 12%.
Yeah.
So a range across the state would be 12 to 14%. So Ankeny is actually on the slightly low end of the range, but within the typical range.
The other thing I would just share anecdotally, again, I'm putting my day hat on. With the changes to open enrollment laws, you see a lot more transition of special ed kids from district to district than we would have seen prior to the change of that law. Depending on, obviously, if the district provides the services. Given that Ankeny is so large, there's a good chance that some smaller districts don't have as diverse special ed programming as Ankeny does. And so, you know, stipulation of open enrollment is if you have the programming, you have to take them. So if we have room in it, right, or space for it, right? So I would just say without the deadline of like March 1st, and I'm an educator by day, we're just seeing a lot more moving of special education students from district to district. Nancy, I don't know if you feel that way here, but that's certainly something we've experienced in our work.
I would agree, but I would also like to say that the space issue is very challenging. We have enough. We have quite a few students here that we want to serve, and so the constant influx of programming with open enrollment makes it very challenging.
Yeah. Heather, you have a question?
It may even be a little bit more of a comment than a question, but just to clarify that I appreciate the question from Senator Buslow and just wanting to know about numbers and percentages around special education students. But for the purposes of this conversation about the AAs as a whole, just wanting to clarify that Heartland AAA and all the AAs for that matter support and are here to support every single student in the district, correct? So it's not just, you know, a numbers thing in terms of what percentage of students would be eligible for services because they support services across the board, correct?
Sure.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. I'm Alan Eppel, Director of Professional Learning and Leadership Development for the Ankeny School District, and I'm going to talk to you about just that, professional learning and the supports that Heartland AA offers specifically to Ankeny schools. You know, the first one that comes to mind is one that's near and dear to me in my work directly, and that is supporting our instructional coaches in Ankeny. We have a team of 39 instructional coaches, and I have the opportunity to work with them regularly, but we partner directly with instructional coach from Heartland AA. I personally partner with that person every single week in planning and preparing for our time with our coaches. Our coaches and our building principals are a part of that learning as well too, which occurs once a month. And that has been significant over the last 4 years, I would say, that we've really increased the programming of our instructional coaches and what they're doing and how that translates to their support for teachers. And that couldn't be done, honestly, right now without the support that we have from Heartland there, and the key people from Heartland that support us in that area. Another area of professional learning that our district has taken advantage of was the Collective Equity Series, and Ken was fortunate to be able to participate that. And Ken walked away from that so moved, so inspired that we then brought that series, so to speak, with Dr. Nicole Law to our own district, to our own administrative team as well too, which was very highly received. Another one would be, there are many different roles at Heartland that support specifically or facilitate or present at building professional learning or district level professional learning every month. In our current PD schedule, when it is once a month, honestly, that allows us to partner with Heartland even more because they're dedicated times like that. And so a principal might work with, for example, Tara had mentioned, you know, while we partnered with a math consultant quite a bit, okay, not only is that person supporting math curriculum, they're providing professional learning. So that goes back to Cindy's comment about sometimes the roles overlap each other as well too. And so we have many different Heartland partners that come into our buildings, whether it's at a building specific PD or whether it's meeting with a group of similar role teachers and providing consultant work or actual leading professional development. Heartland, within the Teacher Leadership Support Network as well, has a program called the New Instructional Coach Academy. As you can imagine, as we grow in Ankeny, we every year we have new instructional coach or coaches. Okay. Sometimes we bring that learning to us, and we do that learning right here. Sometimes we send our instructional coaches to Johnston, to Heartland, to engage in that new instructional coach academy as well. And then along with that, the instructional coaches from Heartland offer ongoing one-on-one coaching for our coaching, again, with the ultimate view that our coaches then help support our teachers, which help support student learning as well. We've had numerous Heartland partners present at our annual Ankeny Summer Academy. As you're aware, I've shared the data before, we have up to around 500 Ankeny teachers participate that every year. And a good number of presenters that choose voluntarily to present at our Ankeny Academy. They aren't paid additionally for that. That's part of their service as employees of Heartland to come in June and share their learning, share their knowledge with our own Ankeny teachers. which is a great partnership because then that continued learning can happen throughout the school year as well. Another section on this slide talks about trainings for staff. Heartland and the AA system, they are the housing place for all the professional development courses throughout the state of Iowa that teachers can choose to be a part of, both mandatory trainings, such as mandatory reporter or child dependent abuse and things like that. That goes through Heartland's system or the AA system, but also just a wide variety of professional learning courses that a teacher could elect to participate in, or a school administrator could elect to participate in. A lot of the times we pair those with licensure renewal credit. Heartland staff or colleagues from across the state develop those courses, write the licensure renewal component so that our teachers can take advantage of that. It's both for their license renewal and potentially to move on a salary schedule as well too. And then along with that, also within that system is where we have our evaluator approval courses that all Iowa administrators have to continually update their evaluator approval. And those courses run through Heartland and the AA system statewide. Again, somebody's writing the course, getting the course approval, which is a partnership between the AA system and the Department of Ed in order to actually create those courses so that our administrators can receive the necessary licensure renewal credit options that they need to have to update their license. So that's one of the aspects of professional learning. Another aspect of this within the Heartland system and the whole AA system, I'm sure, is this concept of leadership networks. And there's a variety of them. The first one is the Curriculum Leadership Network, which, you know, it has a broad audience, but as you can imagine, curriculum leaders, regardless of the title, the role in the districts across the Heartland area, that's a network for them. And they meet regularly, typically Friday mornings, but there's both a Heartland-specific curriculum network and a statewide curriculum network too. And so people from our district office, our academic services team, are regularly invited to those as well too. Another network would be the Future Ready Network. Think post-secondary readiness, think college and career readiness. That's an opportunity for people within our districts and all the districts within Heartland, honestly, to get additional supports there. And they've really developed a really nice Google site with a lot of resources that they've collected around post-secondary readiness. That just helps our district move our focus forward in that area. A superintendent's network that Dr. Pruitt has the opportunity to participate in as well. And then there are things called student services networks. And those would be in the area of talented and gifted network, okay? And the talented gifted team that's already been talked about from Heartland, whether it's their newsletter, whether it's regular meetings as well too, and somebody like Gina Beck that we've already talked about would participate in that, along sometimes with potentially Nancy Lehman. There's an ESOL network, English Speakers of Other Languages network, that both Brandy Wendt, our ESOL specialist, would be able to participate in. And then there's also a variety, or I don't know if I want to say variety, but as you can imagine, the special ed network itself is so expansive that they have regular meetings as well, so that special ed directors, specialists from throughout the Heartland region are able to come together and learn from each other and stay up on the most current things as well. The next one would be specialty networks, and we kind of labeled that ourselves, but that is something like the TLC, Teacher Leadership and Support that way, the Mentoring and Induction Network, and also the Instructional Coach Network. All three of those networks are close to my work. I participate in all three of those networks, and while I'm not there at every one of those meetings, it's important for me that I have that support, even within Ankeny schools, and we're blessed with the resources we have. There's so many of the things that we still need supports in to help us move that needle and to get the work down to the individual teacher or student level. And the last network I would mention would be the Equity Director or Equity Coordinator, depending on the title, their network that supports their work, and being able to come together with like-minded people, similar roles, to talk about the same things, and then feel supported when you're bringing that information back to your district. What I would say about all these networks, while we probably all wish we could attend even more often, the great thing about all these networks is the people behind the scenes that are doing the planning, doing the actual presentations, they're always available for us, okay? And another key piece is whether it's a slide presentation like this one or additional resources, they're always available the month after, a couple of years after. That's a different kind of support. Sometimes I have the opportunity in my role to work with outside vendors, okay, to create contracts with private consultants. Rarely do we get access to the content and the materials after the fact that we can continue to access so that the learning doesn't stop with a one and done situation. So I share that. There are so many things within these networks that turn into additional touch points out in our buildings.
About 5 minutes.
Yep, I'm good. I think it's now me turning it back over to Tara. All right, thank you.
I would just add what Tara transitions up here. A lot of those networks are how we get support for new legislation. So we think about, that doesn't come directly from the Department of Ed, that comes to Heartland, and Heartland then supports districts in implementing, like, I think about district career and academic planning, a number of other things.
Thanks, Al.
All right, I think these next two slides are pretty quick here. Media services. It was, as I was preparing for this, looking at this top bullet here, digital resources, it caused me to pause and recognize how much a part of these resources are in our classrooms. When thinking about the audiobooks, the ebooks, I think of Pebble Go. It is for our kindergarten through third graders when they're learning how to research, and they have articles that they can pull up with great pictures and visuals that are just a part of what we use and the resources that the kids are excited about. And accessible, whether it's in the classroom or in a digital learning classroom also. And that doesn't only go for elementary, that's all the way up through secondary for students accessing audiobooks, their ebooks, articles and videos as far as to support their learning or their research. Professional circulation. As a principal, I often reached out to Heartland AEA and access to some professional learning books before deciding if I was going to purchase that for my instructional leadership team. So just having the opportunity to research and access those texts or new titles that we were interested in before deciding if we will move ahead with that. And then this was discussed earlier as far as the classroom collection circulated in the box sets. We have classroom libraries in every classroom, yet we know sometimes kids just get really excited about different titles, or they want to possibly research a different topic. And so teachers are really good about using the AEA in order to get box sets, or hey, we're getting ready to research rockets. Could we have some additional books that we don't typically have in our classroom library? So that's something that is just a part of our teachers' practices. And then lastly, the creative services. This was another one, pausing and thinking back as principal. Leader in Me is something that we have in many of our buildings, and there were posters that we wanted to have some support and design, whether it's with our students' faces, modeling, and we would often partner with Heartland AEA to be able to support in some of the posters, banners, or signage that we would have. And then lamination. We do have our print shop that does support with a lot of that lamination, but if there were unique pieces or in addition to, we would often reach out to Heartland AEA for some of those additional services with both printing and the lamination. All right.
Any questions?
I have a holistic question. So we just got a litany of all the services that they provide. Is all of this included with the flow through? Are we paying anything additional for that? Is all of what was all shared, all included in the flow through equation that we pay every year? Like the 600? Well, the 6 million, 6.8.
With regards to services that are available to the district, no additional funding goes towards the AEA. Outside of the professional learning services that any of us that work in our district might take advantage of, there may be a cost for that, but that's the online learning that is a choice for all of us.
So for example, I wanted to take a class and get Drake graduate credit for it. I would choose to pay for that, like Drake graduate credit for that or whatever. There might be a small circumstance like Cindy referenced bringing a somebody from Solution Tree that costs $14,000 or something, you wanna sign up for that, they may charge districts a fee per head to cover the cost of that, but I would say most of the time there's not an additional cost.
I don't know who this question would go to. So, the special education services, a lot of those you can find in the private sector, which is a concern that we might have to do. But my question is, on this sheet right here, in the upper right-hand corner, it lists the services we could lose. Are those, as a math consultant, available in the private sector? Like, what would you do if you needed that and it no longer existed?
So math consultants are available
Okay.
in the private sector. But I think that right now, because of some of the changes that are taking place with the bill, I think it's too early to tell what services would continue with AEA until we get the rewrite of the bill.
I understand that. I just want to know, I don't know the answer to the question. Yeah. Can you find all of these things in the private sector should you need them?
I would say and I hate to read everybody.
And you don't have to, and you give me a general answer.
Yes.
But I mean, I know you can find an occupational therapist in the private sector.
So with regards to finding a consultant around literacy, math, science, social studies, CTE, career technical education, the school improvement, English learner, MTSS, I think all those are available in the private sector. I think it's just an issue of quality when you begin shopping around for consultants, and then
quality and rate.
Quality, price, definitely, and then their ability to work within Iowa and then understand Iowa's system.
Okay. Thank you.
My experience in other districts has been with math and literacy. They're almost universal across the nation. But if you get something specific to Iowa,
okay.
That's when finding the right consultant sometimes might be difficult.
Okay. And we can't call them up on Monday and have them be here on Tuesday.
Right.
Other questions? Any questions from the five of you? Okay. We appreciate you joining us tonight. We are certainly understanding you've got other commitments. We do have a few people who are choosing to speak on behalf of the public. If you want to stick around for that and listen to them, you're welcome to do that. Otherwise, we're going to get started with our regular meeting.
Before you get started with the regular meeting, I just want to say, again, reiterate, thank you for being here to our legislators. And then also that all five of you should have an invite from the district to walk schools with me over the next few months. And so I'm really looking forward to walking Ankeny schools with you and showing our students and teachers off.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for being here.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.